Let's do this. So first of all, I'd like to welcome everyone to the call today. I'm super excited about this one. I've known these guys for quite a while, and we're going to be talking about this whole idea of unlocking growth in a challenging talent market. So let's just start with a bit of an overview of what this is all about. Mastering team building for business success has been around forever. But the real issue has been what's been happening in the economy over the last couple of years has really made it very different. And we used to be in a world where, thinking about offshoring, it's not new, but for a lot of people, they've tried it, hasn't worked out so well. Even this week, I was watching the news and the CFMEU have decided that they're going to get a 20% pay increase. So we're watching wages go up in our markets. And we're really just looking at how do you grow when there's not enough people around, when the resources are shy. Today, I'm really excited about this presentation because this is not a presentation. This is a case study. These guys have done it. What they've done is they've actually successfully transitioned to integrating offshoring and onshore to actually grow businesses. So we're going to be talking about their world and how they did it, which is super exciting. For those who I haven't met before, my name's David Guest. I run Outcomes Business Group. We host these events. And one of the real specific reasons that I host this event with these guys is because our business is about building self-managed teams. And when it comes to building teams, it's always expensive. It's always risky. We're dealing with humans, but it's also probably the biggest point of leverage in any business. So one of my favorite comments, and I picked this up from a guy in the States, Ryan Deese, and he said that the more valuable you are to your business, the less valuable your business is. And sometimes I have to remind people of this because they come back to me and they say, no one does it as well as I do. I can't find good people. If you want something done properly, everyone knows the sort of second part of that comment is you've got to find the right people and train them. So we're going to be talking about how you crack this nut today. And so the biggest problem we deal with people in business is this thing called busyness. Now, people get confused because when I ask people, how's business going, they tell us how busy they are. And sometimes busy just means randomly running around and just chasing your tail and just making ends meet and trying to survive. And I think that's a bit of a travesty. The second thing is that they're not necessarily profitable. And what I mean by this is I watch people who have great revenues in their business, but there's not much left at the end of the month. So their profitability is down low. The third thing is that they just tell me they can't find good people. It's a challenging talent market. Today is about how do we navigate this. So we're going to be talking about the flip side of this. But ultimately, they get stuck on this treadmill they call business. So what we're looking for is less stress. We're looking for more profits. We're looking for ways to find great team members. And ultimately, for the business owner, it's about freedom. So for those who are in business, sometimes freedom looks like cash in the bank. Sometimes freedom just looks like give me some time so I can work on the things that are important to me. And sometimes freedom means just spending more time with family and friends. Everyone has a different definition of freedom. So let's talk about some of the endemic problems that people in business have and what we need to do about it. So if we look at most business models, operations is the majority of the business. And normally there's a little bit of admin that goes off on the side, and there's a tiny little bit of sales and marketing. Now, when I ask people, why is sales and marketing the smaller circle? They usually tell me we don't need to market because most of our business comes from word of mouth or referral. Is anyone on this call in that situation where they get most of their business from word of mouth or referral? Can I just get a quick sort of show of hands? There's a couple waving, a couple nodding. That's all great. But here's what I believe the real problem is when we talk to these people about growing or scaling their business, they freak out. And the reason they freak out is they're already busy. And we talk about doubling or tripling business, and they go, God, I'm already working 10 hours a day. How can I possibly double that? And so the issue is that they're stuck dead center of the business. They've got their finger in every single pie, which means they can't scale. The perfect business looks like this, right? You need sales and marketing because fresh blood is the lifeblood of business. You need operations because that's where the cash comes from, and you need admin to make sure all of the ducks line up. And the ultimate place for the business owner is to be sitting there on the outside. Now, this business model is scalable. The other one I showed you is not. So when I hear this, I don't need to market because I get most of my work through word of mouth or referral. What I'm actually hearing is I'm scared of growth. I'm scared of growth because if I do find new clients, I do not know how to service them. Today, we're going to be talking about how you bust that. So one of the things, I've been doing this for about 24 years, 25 years next year, which is terrifying because that's a quarter of a century. And I didn't think I was that old. But one thing I realized is for most people in business, they go into business for all the right reasons, but they get hijacked. And it's a bit like a 4-year-old taking a Great Dane for a walk. The question is, who's walking who? And what I mean by that is they go, oh, I'm going to run my own business so I can have the freedom and lifestyle choices and I can make lots of money and work little hours. And they actually do the opposite. And they start working harder than they would ever work for a wage. And the profit that's left over at the end of the month is not so great. And so what went wrong? Well, I look at it as 4 phases of growth. The first phase is you got to get out of chaos. Now, if you run a business that's chaotic and you grow it, all you do is grow the chaos. So you've got to get some controls in place. The second phase is then cash flow, the cash flow engine. And what I talk about here is cash is king. And we need to generate revenue because without money coming in, we can't grow. The third piece is building teams. And the last piece is leveraging yourself out. Now, today's case study from the Guild Group, Brenton, is going to talk about how he's actually done this over the last 7 years. And it's a super interesting story because when we talk about theory, everyone goes, yeah, okay, theory's great. And it's nice to know that to get to my goal, I just have to go up this sort of triangle and get to the top. But most people don't realize it's not a straight line, right? You actually have to go through the process of building your business. And there's literally 12 steps that we go through. I'm not going to go through all of these today because I don't have time to, and I want to make sure that you hear the story from Adam and Brenton. But this is the model we use to build businesses. And what it tells us is that you need to know where you're going. Then you've got to start building your systems. Then you've got to build your team. And then finally, you can go and do what you're supposed to be doing as a business owner, which is lead, inspire, and finally ascend so you can get to the next stage of growth in the business. The case study today is going to show you exactly how that's happened for Brenton and the gang at Guild. But one of my favorite business philosophers, Bruce Lee, said it quite well. He said, knowing the theory is not enough, right? You've got to apply it. And willing is not enough. You've actually got to do it. So when we hear stories of people who have done it, it inspires me to know it's possible. It inspires other people to know that there is a path that we can go down. And that's really what today's about. Now, just because I've gone so quickly through this model, we do this training called Self-Managed Team Mastery. And we run this every couple of months. The next one is on the 24th of July. Anyone on this call that's interested in attending that, we talk about profitability, we talk about performance of team, we talk about management, leadership, and you'll walk away with a plan. Now, this is just going to help you if you've not done this before. Today, what we're going to be talking about is a case study of someone who's done this already. We're going to talk about all the ins and outs. And first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce Adam Conrad. Now, for those who don't know Adam, Adam's been running an organization called Integrate. And he's been in this offshoring or outsourcing world for quite some time. And when he went into it with the view of this is not just cheap labor. This is a way to change the way that we run businesses. And he's done this successfully with a number of clients, but the one that's really special to me and to him probably is Brenton, who's on the call today. Now, the good news is these guys are not presenters. They're actually just people who run businesses. And what they're going to be talking about today is actually how that journey went. So what I'd like to do now is hand over to Adam. You can give us a bit more background if I haven't covered everything, Adam, and then we can get stuck into the story.
All right, thank you very much, David. And I do highly recommend attending that course that you gave a plug to. I did that a number of years ago and found it super beneficial. But a little bit about myself. I'm the CEO of Integrate Solutions, a business that I started just on 6 years ago. But going back a little bit, I started out in my professional life as a qualified accountant. In 2003, I decided to move to Ireland, where I was lucky enough to get a role with Accenture in their European Service Centre. And what Accenture were doing at that time was taking their back office functions from all around Europe and bringing them into Ireland to standardise and get cost efficiencies and productivity efficiencies in all of their back office functions. And I saw how well that worked for Accenture at that time. And it didn't matter what languages these countries spoke or which currencies that they actually dealt with. Things got done in a one-way, same-way approach. I then took my career into banking and worked at Deutsche Bank, and I was the global CFO looking after all the back office functions. And very early into my role there, I was asked to offshore 60-odd roles across to Manila in the Philippines. At that stage, I didn't even know where Manila actually was. And all I knew was I had to take these 60 roles out of a combination of Germany, New York, and London. And what I quickly learnt was that everybody in each of those 3 countries did things in a very, very different way. And it was going to make it very, very difficult to offshore these roles and put them into the captive that Deutsche Bank had built over in the Philippines. But we did all of that work, and we took the one-way, same-way approach that I learnt at Accenture, and that offshoring worked out very, very successfully. In 2008, I returned back to Australia and took up a role at ANZ, heading up their productivity, and again had a lot of exposure not only to cost reduction but productivity improvements, customer efficiencies as well. And then 2018, I got to the fork in my career where I decided I'd like to take everything that I've actually learned and help businesses, specifically SME businesses, get into outsourcing and offshoring. And that's where Integrate actually started. So we do focus specifically on SME businesses. Originally, we were Australian focused, but we are now a globally focused business, and we've got clients across 7 different countries. And we have over 1,000 staff and over 140 different clients that we support today. So that's a little bit, David, about Integrate in a nutshell. And during that time, and one of our very first customers that we brought on 6 years ago was Brenton Ellis, and Brenton's kindly decided to join this webinar here today. So I'd like to introduce everybody to Brenton Ellis from the Guild Group. Hi, Brenton. If we could kick off with a little bit of a brief introduction, if you wouldn't mind telling me a little bit about your background, please.
Actually, just before you do that, just for everyone on the call, the chat box. The chat box is there. If you have any questions or comments as we go, because these guys are going to go at about 1,000 miles an hour because they've been doing this for years, right? So I just want you to think about if there's any specific questions you have around this, just throw them into the chat box. I'll be monitoring it, and then I'll bring them up to the presenters as we go. Back to you.
All right, then. So back to Brenton, I'll just repeat that question. If you'd like to tell us a little bit about your background, please.
Yeah, sure.
You now obviously work at the Guild Group. If you could also tell us a little bit about your role at the Guild Group and about the Guild Group overall, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming along and listening to the story. So for those who don't know, so the Guild Group, we're a national professional services firm. So we provide services across accounting, wealth, finance, general insurance, legal. We have a marketing arm and also a logistics arm to our business. So we have a diverse service offering across our client base. We are about 180 staff across the Philippines and Australia, and we'll talk about some of that and how we kind of operate today. And yeah, have a really kind of progressive, unique brand that's really exciting. We're about 30 mil revenue, and we've scaled the business about 10x in the last in terms of revenue and people size. It's gone from about 3.5 mil to 30 mil in the last 5 years. So there's some of the things that we'll talk about today. My background, just really quickly, is I spent 10 years in public practice with a mid-tier accounting firm. Took a short stint as a CFO of a hotel group, and that experience basically gave me a lot of exposure to really rapid growth and scale and M&A type transactions. We went from a portfolio of 6 hotels to there was 15 hotels within a 5-year period that I was there. So off the back of that, started my own accounting firm, which eventually merged into the Guild Group for part of the reasons that we're talking about today, through successful kind of offshoring strategies and structures that were put in place. But I guess that's me in a nutshell. Today's a little bit about that whole story, so we'll probably just go through that in a bit more detail.
All right, then. Thank you very much, Brenton, for that introduction. One of the things I get asked a lot, Brenton, is about how do businesses make that quantum leap into offshoring. So if I could get you, please, to cast your mind back 5 years ago and your days when you're at Network Financial Group before you moved across to the Guild Group.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your business at that time, the challenges that you were facing and why you ultimately took that leap into offshoring, please?
Yeah, sure. So going back to David's diagram before with the triangle and about the chaos, my world was complete chaos. So off the back of being in the pubs and starting Network Financial Group, I had significant growth. So I grew $1 million worth of fees in 12 months, which sounds awesome, but I was stressed out. I was about 20 kilos heavier. I had a newborn baby at home. I had a wife that was about to leave me. I was just hiring people left, right, and center with no real strategy or structure on the type of people that I was putting in the business. It was, phone calls or emails saying, hey, my friend's cousin's looking for a job. And I was like, yep, great, awesome. And so had built all of this revenue and the business had scaled really quickly, but there was no structure there to, I guess, give the service to the clients, but then also alleviate and spread some of that workload around from myself. So all roads kind of led back to me, and how the story of the Gill Group actually came about was my now business partner had originally started the Gill Group a couple of years earlier. We had a mutual client. He'd been working with Adam and the offshoring strategy for about maybe 12 months, I think it was, Adam, before we met. And he was like, hey, we've set up this structure. We're using offshoring. I said, look, I've dabbled with offshoring before. It's not for me. Thanks, but no thanks. And a couple of weeks later, a couple more clients came on, and I think I put the phone call back out and said, hey, about that offshoring, let's get together and have a chat. And hence the introduction there to Adam. So I was actually really kind of forced to look at all options because what I was trying to implement just really wasn't working to help with the scale. And so I wanted to understand a little bit more about the structure and how it worked. So it was really kind of forced into looking at that. What's the best way to structure it and how it is successful is how that came about.
All right, thank you for that. And do you want to tell us a little bit about? I know you had some reservations at that time about going into offshoring, and I'm really keen if you'd be able to explain to us how you overcome those objections from a personal perspective and being able to hand over that work to people in a foreign country. What were some of the things that were going through your mind and those concerns that you had at that time?
So, offshoring's been around for a long time, and at my time when I was previously in practice, we had dabbled in offshoring in the early days, we didn't really have the right, a good client experience. So work would go out, and it would take months to come back, and the quality of work might not have been there, and so that was really where my reservations came from. Is just that experience. Coming back into it, having a look, it was really about putting the right structure in place. So understanding, so the model that we have at Guild is our Filipino team handle a lot of the day-to-day tasks that are supported by client-facing managers. So that's when we came to Adam, and this is where working with you and your team, Adam, really helped understand how that model works from a scalability perspective, and also the quality of work and the turnaround. It was about having the re-looking at this and coming back with a fresh set of eyes about how do we actually operate this effectively. And that's how we still run, we call them our pods within our business. So each of the pods, through accounting, wealth, through to our admin team, we've got marketing, sales and marketing team, each of the areas of our business, they're all at different levels, but they all effectively follow that same kind of blueprint. It's about having our senior client-facing AU people here that are supported by our Filipino team. So that was where the kind of the reservations came from, and how we looked at that with a fresh lens.
All righty then. And when you did start, you jumped in feet first, and you started with 3 people. Do you want to take us back to what some of your earliest thoughts were? Obviously, I know one of the very first things that you did was come across and you celebrated our first anniversary with us.
Yep.
Would you just like to cover off a little bit about what those early days look like and how you got the team started?
Yeah. So again, with the growth that I had, I needed a solution. And so we caught up at one of my old offices, Adam, and we sat down, and your experience through Deutsche Bank and all the big corporates, I really resonated to that because you were really experienced, and it was nice working with Integrate because there was a lot of hand holding. So I remember at the time about, having to set up and go through the cultural training and all of the kind of onboarding that Integrate takes you through. I didn't have the time to sit there and go through that, but we sat down and went through that whole process. And I think we had the first employee that came on board for me was a lady named Lani. who came on as an accountant that was assisting me at the time of handling bookkeeping and type of management accounting. Had a really good experience with Lani in the first kind of 4 weeks. The good experience was where I really got leverage. So Lani would send me like end of day, end of week reports. I didn't ask her to do that. That was from the framework that Integrate had built and pushed down to their team of how to deal with their clients. So I would be sitting there and Lani would send me a report saying, hey, Brenton, here's where all the jobs are at and here's the statuses and here's where I'm having roadblocks. And I really loved that. I was starting to see to get some leverage and starting to see how this could be really successful, to the point where we jumped in and put another 2 roles in, I think, within the first month. Adam and Lani's still with our business now. She's one of my right-hand people in the big Guild Group beast that is now in our operation. So Lani's actually, her career progression has been great to watch through, bookkeeping roles. She was our internal financial controller at one point, to now being our senior operations manager that looks after our 55-odd Filipino team.
Yeah, everybody at Integrate knows Lani. She's been a star at Integrate for the 5 years that she's been with us, and she's absolutely fantastic. I think one of the things that a lot of people would be really keen to understand, Brenton, is what are your top tips for offshoring? You've obviously been able to build a significant team, and you've been able to keep all of your top talent. A lot of the myths around offshoring are that there's high attrition and significant wage inflation, et cetera. Would you like to tell us how you've overcome those and just share with us your top tips for building an offshore team, please?
Yeah, sure. So look, I always say to people, whenever they start to dabble the toes in the water, which is the advice that you originally gave me, Adam, was particularly when you're starting out with a small team, it's don't look for graduate type positions. You're not out there actually chasing a low cost. Like, yes, there is a cost saving, but the cost saving is actually the last benefit. Outsourcing to the Philippines is about tapping into a global talent pool of people who we're really culturally aligned with, have a really good skill set, university qualified, etc. So my number one thing that I say to people is, when you're starting to look at this strategy within your business, the first couple of hires need to be really senior people. So in the early days for Guild, our criteria was minimum 3 to 5 years. I think we're at, Adam. So it was minimum 3 to 5 years AU tax experience. So they had to have tax experience, but it had to be AU. So because it's obviously a global talent pool, some have US or some might have European type experience. That was the criteria. Now at the size of we're at, we have like a graduate program because we've got Lani's and, Cecile's and Sharice's and other senior people within our business that we can get leverage to bring in 1 to 2 year graduates and train them up. But in the early days, you want to really make sure that you've got that core team that's got that that experience that you're looking for within your industry. And it's the same across, whether it's an internal finance person, whether it's, through a marketing arm, or I know you guys do some work in the building construction, like quantity surveyor type work. So the first couple of hires, that's the first and foremost thing that I say to everyone. I guess the second big point is about having structure. So you can't just go out and hire, a team of 5 or 10 people and, just expect it to operate. We run what we call our pod structures, which, as I was saying, is we have senior client-facing people that are supported by, our Filipino resources. And then within that, we have seniors, intermediates, and juniors as well. Now that's developed over time. We never always had that structure. As we've kind of scaled the business, that structure has also scaled, and we're continuously looking at it as well. So it's, I guess, just encouraging people, and this is where you can work well with integrating your team as well. to actually help build that out. So based on experience with other clients in other industries, how do other clients run, structures on different businesses? I think then, once you've got the people, it's about, how do you keep them within the business? So we look at our team in the Philippines exactly as we look at them here in Australia. We're involved with career plans. We're involved with bonus and incentive frameworks, which we're currently redoing and about to roll out. We're also about to launch currently launching an ESOP and ESS plan for our AU team. And once we've got that in place, we're looking at how can we then roll that out further on the Filipino side. I'm sure we're going to have a few fun conversations with local lawyers and stuff when we get to that point, Adam. But it's about even though the people are not sitting in the same room as us, a lot of the meetings and the way that we interact with people these days and clients is exactly like this forum here. So there's no difference with how we treat our team in terms of their career plans and what we look for, what we look for long term. So they're kind of the top three things as well. I guess it's also then just culturally making sure that you've got a really good working environment. We've had some really significant changes over the last 6 months in terms of our executive team and practice management rollout of new software across the business, which has meant that our quarterly functions had dropped off the radar, and the team had come to Lani recently and said, hey, the morale's really low within the team. We used to catch up once a quarter and have like an afternoon off and go out for lunch. And I said, Lani, why is that dropped off? Like, let's get straight back onto that. And those types of things are really super important from a team building perspective. So we basically mirror everything that we do here. We mirror overseas. We have a quarterly function here. We have a quarterly function, aligned in the Philippines as well. So there, and then obviously, whenever you can, attending overseas to meet people and really build those solid relationships. Like we were saying, I think Lani's been with the business for probably 5 years now. Senior person, go over there. She's bought presents for my kids and vice versa. When we go over there, like we've built a really strong relationship. And similarly, when we had our practice management rollout a couple of months ago, we flew 3 or 4 of the guys out and brought them out for a week to sit down and really map out how we're going to, change our process and go through this system change.
So, Brenton, I've got a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
The first one is, you talked about getting senior talent and someone with 3 to 4 years tax experience, Australian tax experience. What sort of price point are we looking at for a resource like that?
Sure. So 3 to 5 year tax experience these days, you're probably looking at somewhere between the kind of 40 to 50 at the top end AU total cost. That includes wage plus the management fee that you pay to integrate to obviously do all the legals and the overseeing of that. So, that rollout here could be anywhere from kind of 90 to 120,000, depending on the experience and the year. So there's definitely a cost saving there, but
that's okay.
I always say that it's the final benefit that's part of this strategy. It's not something that you should be out there to get. And even with Integrate, there's it's a premium service. So there's outsourcing. Correct me if I get the terminology wrong, but there's outsourcing and offshoring. So outsourcing is where you actually completely outsource a function and it comes back and it's something, it's like a contractor payment that you're paying for. With the offshoring, these guys are part of our team. So we're involved in career plans. We're involved in, these types of quarterly functions and basically the role that Integrate plays is the legal employer that sits over the top, plus all the, training and guidance that comes with it.
Cool. I have a second question. Your senior team in Australia, how did they react or respond, or did they push back when you started talking about sharing this workload with people offshore?
Not at all. Our team have really strong relationships with the Filipino team, like they do here. So, in one of our business management teams that's been around for probably the longest of the Guild Group's journey, Cecile, who's one of the senior person in that team, and her direct manager Steve are super close. Because they've worked together for so long. So it's just an extension of the team. It's not looked that way at all.
So looking back in history, this is an interesting question. Knowing what you know now, and if we went back 7 years, what would you do differently?
From my personal perspective, the issue that I had in that first year was I basically had no plan. I had clients and I had referrals and I was growing, but I had no plan on what is the structure of the business, what is the structure of the team to be able to get that scale and to be able to make sure that the clients are getting a good experience. Because that's what it comes down to in our game. So that's, since merging my business in with the Guild Group and going on the journey that we've done together, we've grown and continuously adjusted those processes, but that's what I would have done differently from the start.
Awesome. Thank you. There's a couple of questions in the chat, but I'll let Adam keep going with his line, and we'll come around to those. So Anthony's got a few questions in there.
All right, thank you, David. And just to cover off further on one of the points that Brenton did raise there, and we see this a lot. And there's a client who we've got on board who started a couple of weeks ago, and they spent last week over in the Philippines. As you heard, that Brenton goes over every year for our anniversary party, and we have that every July to celebrate our best staff. We invite all of our staff to that event. It's a black tie event. And this year we've got about 40 clients coming across for that event as well. And it's a great time for them to be with the team, to meet them, to train and develop them, understand what their culture is and what their working environment is, and break a lot of myths in their mind as well. But one of the keys that Brenton touched on that we really do try and educate our customers on is make sure that they do feel part of your business. If you come over and you'll see the Guild Group in the offices, they all wear their Guild t-shirts. The Guild look after, obviously, they've got some really funky branding and stuff like that and some really cool t-shirts. All of the staff wear them, and they wear those shirts with pride, those t-shirts. So there's a lot of little things that we train and we educate our clients on to make sure that team does feel like they are part of the team. They're not the Philippine team or the Australian team or the German team or the UK team. They're one integrated team. But back to you, Brenton. And thank you for those tips. As you've mentioned a couple of times, the Guild Group is really, really fast moving. It's a really dynamic business. It's always growing, and it's had a large number of acquisitions over the last couple of years in particular. Would you like to take us through how do you merge those new businesses into Guild, and how do those conversations go with those new partners that you're bringing on board in relation to offshoring?
Yeah, sure. So, sorry, just skipping back to one of the points that you just made there. That was like one of the things that I found really and still find really valuable to this day, to be honest, Adam, is reaching out to you and integrate in terms of how we should be looking at things like the t-shirts and those kind of things, and that real cultural awareness. So that's something that I do really value in the relationship. But yeah, so in terms of, we've basically, our growth journey is basically twofold. So we have really strong organic growth from making sure that we always focus on clients and deliverable, and making sure that we've got a really good client experience with really good technical people and industry specialists. That's where our organic growth comes from. And in order to support the level of growth that we had, part of our offshoring strategy has enabled us to scale. So yes, like we said, there is that cost saving benefit. In order to get more resources on and help with that level of scale that we've had, it's been part of the success because we've been able to put more resources on to help our clients and service more clients as we've grown. On the other side of that, we have an M&A strategy. So we've done 13 M&A transactions in the last 5 years. So it's been pretty significant. We're in consolidation mode at the moment. We have 2 firms joining us next week in Sydney. And then we're consolidating for 12 months, which we've been saying for the last few years, but that's where we're currently at. So each of the partners that joins us is at different levels within Guild. So Guild has its overarching strategy. Some of the original Guild books that have been in the business for a long time are a lot more mature and established in their team building and their offshoring. And some of the newer businesses that have joined us are at different levels. So two of the firms, if I can just use them as an example, two of the firms that are joining us next week, one of them we've been talking to for about 6 or 9 months, and they had already had some Filipino team members and weren't having a really good experience. So as part of our discussions, they actually started talking to Adam and Integrate and moved, basically started hiring some more team through Integrate. And I had a conversation with her last week and I was like, how's everything going? And she's like, it's completely different to the experience that I'd had previously. And I think that comes down to Integrate having that premium offering, and you pay more for that too. Like there's cheaper operators out there. There are, Adam. There's cheaper operators out there, but I always say to clients, like, that's not what you're chasing, or if that's what you're chasing, you're not going to get the same. You're not going to get the same experience. So yeah, it was interesting to hear that feedback that she was really loving the Integrate experience. I think she's got 3 roles now, 2 or 3 roles in the last couple of months. She previously had 1 or 2 roles and has seen how that's been successful and grown that out. The other business that's joining us, they've had no offshoring whatsoever. So basically what we've decided, or what they've decided as a team, is how they want to put their toes in the water. Is one of the partners within that business has a current resource out at the moment. She's going to be the guinea pig, and she's going to test all these theories that we're talking about with our pod structures and how we operate efficiently. One of the team is going to test that, and then once they get some runs on the board, then the wider team, we're going to roll out a bigger strategy. So each of the businesses within our organisation is at different levels with that. But every single one of them definitely has it as part of their strategy. Some are at the extreme scale and some are, a little bit less, which is fine.
So can I just jump in here? There's this question from Anthony in the chat. He talks about how would you convince someone who's reluctant to try offshoring for support, right? And the question was, how has your client base responded when they find your business offshores its work?
Yep. So initially, it was definitely a part of a conversation that, it was having with clients and saying we're offshoring. When we see the quality of the work that comes out, it's just a non-issue for us. So until we started getting the runs on the board, like if a client had an issue with us offshoring, they're not the right client for us. There's a million firms out there, and I always say to clients, I use it as an example where we say, hey, this is what we've put in our business. This is how we've been able to scale. This is the kind of revenue and profit margins that we've been able to achieve. Like, don't you want to have a look at that and use that as a bit of a blueprint as well? So we have different setups with our clients. So we actually place roles directly into some of our clients. So we might start out handling bookkeeping and management accounting and CFO advisory services, and some of our clients scale to a point where it makes sense for them to have someone internally. And so if we actually do a successful job in our CFO advisory work, we actually end up working ourselves out of a job and placing someone in there full time where they take that internal. So look, it's definitely, a conversation. Even some of the new businesses that are joining us at the moment, we're having that conversation with them right at this moment where they're like, how do we talk to clients about it? It's like, well, you just be open and tell the clients that this is the model. It's from a client perspective that having the AU person there is like key to the success of it as well, because they know that there's a team in the Philippines that are helping with the work, but I'm going to my AU person. And that's my key point of contact. We have some of our team that run engagements direct with clients, and the clients are aware of it, but it is rare. We're very kind of conscious of how that how that relationship piece works. Some clients absolutely love it, and so we let that relationship run with oversight in the background. Other clients are a little bit more, hesitant. So we just keep an eye on the kind of interactions and what level of interactions each of the team are having. So it's, I guess, to answer the question, it's a non-negotiable for us from a client perspective, and we fully support it because of the quality of the work.
Yeah.
But then how much interaction and at what level, we manage that on a client by client basis.
And this is sort of the secret sauce. So I just wanted to hover on this point because there is a stigma, okay, about offshoring, and they're culturally different, and they really don't understand our business, and they're not concerned. And what you've just described is you go for top talent, you prove they can deliver the product or service, and then the client really doesn't care whether they're onshore or offshore as long as the job gets done.
Yep. And again, depending on the type of business and the type of role that you're looking at, I use the example of the 3 to 5 years AU tax experience. One of the criteria could be communication. So written and verbal communication needs to be at level 10 or whatever the levels are.
Yep.
It needs to be at that top level. So you can set the criteria like you would hiring someone locally here as well.
If I could just jump in there as well and just say a couple of things that we do at Integrate as well in relation to Anthony's question there. So in the recruitment process, we get a job description from our clients. We then go out and we advertise for that. We vet all the CVs. If we like those individuals on paper, we get them in for an interview. We test their things like their ability to be able to communicate effectively, get them to talk to their CV, etc. Once they pass that interview, they have to sit an aptitude test, which is through a global provider called SHL, and that tests their inductive and their deductive reasoning, their verbal and numerical reasoning, and their problem solving and decision making. They get through that. We'll then get them to sit an accounting exam or a bookkeeping exam or a relevant case study to whichever role they're actually applying for. But in the case of an accounting role, they would be the ones that we'd do. Then the client gets to interview them. If they like them, we'll employ them on their behalf, but the client gets the final say in who works for them. If the client doesn't like the individual, they don't have to take them. We keep going back and find someone until we do. With the terms of the contract as well, you don't sign a contract with us until you find someone you'd like to hire. All of our staff start out with their first 6 months as probationary employees as well, and we measure that at 30, 60, 90 and 150 days. And at any of those junctures, if the staff aren't passing their KPIs and they're failing, we can end the staff member's employment, and the agreement with Integrate can be terminated. So there's really clear and transparent barriers to entry. There's no contractual gotchas that you have to stay with us for 5 years and you have to keep people who aren't performing and things like that. Yeah. Everything's very, very transparent as well from our end.
Yeah. I think, if I look at it from a global perspective, I think what you're saying is that there's a lot more talent available than just in Australia. And I think in Australia, one of the dilemmas that people get into is they employ, and there's only limited applicants, which means they're going to choose the best of 3. What you're talking about is you've got a massive pool you can go to, which then lifts the standard. So you can say, well, I'm going to be quite specific about what I'm looking for because there's lots of candidates here and I can pick the top of the pool as opposed to picking best of 3.
Yeah, that's true. I think Adam just raised a really good point there about the kind of barriers to entry and thinking that the commitment and all that type of stuff. And I remember that was something that in the early days for me when I hired Lani and the other 2 employees at the start was thinking along those lines. So as Adam said, no commitment. Let's get some job ads up. You guys have got templates for kind of most jobs already that kind of fit 80% of probably what people are looking for. It was about, putting the ad up, getting the resources that would come through. And what I found and what made the process really easy is that instead of having to worry that, you guys were putting candidates in front of me quite quickly. And so it just actually naturally just evolved really, really, really well. And I remember actually the night before, Adam, I think it was the guys were starting on a Monday, and I think I called you on the Friday and said, "No, I'm pulling the pin." and tried to get out of it at last minute, and you convinced me otherwise, and I'm glad that you did.
So am I, Brendan. I'm absolutely glad that you did. I'm going to jump in with another question if I can. And obviously today you've got a significant team. I think you've got about 55 staff over in the Philippines at the moment.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there's a lot of people who are going to be watching this who want to really understand, how do you actually manage it? How do you manage the productivity? How do you manage the performance, the quality? How do you keep the team engaged? Great if you could share your insights on what you guys have found to be successful from running a large offshore team.
Yeah, sure. So, look, again, it's structure. Lani is our operations manager. So we have Rachel's our operations manager in Australia. Lani's our operations manager in the Philippines, and Lani reports into Rachel. So Lani's responsibility is basically to oversee everyone in terms of performance management, in terms of morale, in terms of career plans, in terms of goals and KPIs and what we're trying to set from a business strategic level, and basically making sure that they're being monitored and implemented with the team. So to be honest, it's exactly the same as we run out here. So, we're in the office today and there's probably, I don't know how many people we have in Victoria, call it 50, 60 people in Victoria. We're in the office today and there's probably 2 people. So we still have that hybrid flexible working environment where it's like this. So our daily check-ins are through Teams, they're through video, video communication channels. The performance is managed exactly like it is with our AU team out here. So we have our practice management system that runs all of our kind of productivity reporting and time sheeting and workflows and all those types of things, which then Lani then collates all of that information and reports back up to the appropriate people, so that we're so the management of individual direct management lines that they have, and then the wider executive team as well. So it's just an extension of exactly what we have here.
All right, then. Thank you for that. I know that we've spoken a little bit about engagement previously, but I'd really like to dig into it if I could. And you guys obviously come across every year to the Philippines. You touched on before that you've brought some of your top performers out to Australia as well. Do you want to take us through, what does your day-to-day interactions look like with the team? How do you build those relationships, and what do you see as the most important things to do from that engagement perspective?
Yeah, so look, coming across once a year, that we're coming across in a couple of weeks as well, it's really good to see people face to face, spend a week in the office together. We basically we set our business strategy. So we have a 5-year strategic plan that we're working on in our business, and then every year we continue to review and adapt that as appropriate as we grow. And so we set that strategy as a board, we deliver it to the AU team, and then we make a trip over for the anniversary of Integrate, but also to deliver our strategic goals to our team. And part of that is about, so this year we'll be delivering the strategy and say, this is where we're at, these are the things that we want to achieve, and we'll have little different breakout groups where they'll basically be given the opportunity to feed up how they're going to help us achieve that strategy, what are the roadblocks that they're having, and what are the suggestions. And it's really good to get different perspectives from the AU and the Filipino side of things, because they play different roles, but just because culturally they align different. So that really brings that engagement. That's really the cornerstone, I think, of having involvement at all different levels, and people feeling like they have a voice and that they're part of this big organisation that we've got, and how can they have, their kind of input really valued. To then breaking it down to the kind of more day-to-day ongoing, where it's like, hey, we want to run quarterly functions. And so we'll go to Lani and go, hey, whatever the AU guys want is probably irrelevant. What do the Filipino guys want? Do they want, do they want morning teas? Do the guys here want morning teas? Probably not. Do the guys want morning teas in the Philippines? They love it. Just as an example, they love the lunches where they might want to go to a smash room here and do something like that. They might do something, go on a small trip together, or have some kind of interaction together. So then that ongoing, I guess, cultural and just general kind of wellness that we offer, we really, again, ground up, build that from what the team want, and feed that back. And I guess if you kind of just take it back to a smaller team as well, because we have Lani in operations and that type of structure, from a smaller team, if it's a business that has 1 or 2 employees, you would go to integrate for that and say, hey, integrate, like, we want to roll out some kind of, quarterly, monthly type wellness program or cultural engagement type function. What are the suggestions that you give? And that's how, without having the same level of structure that we have, that's where Integrate does provide that, which is what we did in the early days too, Adam.
All right, thank you very much. I'm not sure if there's any further questions in the chat, David. But those are the main questions that I wanted to speak to Brenton about today.
Yeah, look, there isn't at the moment, but I'm just going to open that floor. If anyone's got any specific questions, now's your chance. But I guess, look, you guys have got a lot of people offshore right now. And for some people, they go, that's fine. You've got a big team. You've got massive systems. I mean, there must have been some fears. When you first went into this, there must have been some trepidation around, how do I afford to build this team? What happens if it doesn't work out? What were the things that kept you up at night when you first started, and how did you deal with them?
Look, to be honest, what was keeping me up was the workload. It was the growth, and that I didn't have the resources and the support. So this actually fixed this fixed my problem.
Yep.
And it's part of a bigger strategy. It's not, this is the one thing that has fixed my problem. Like, this is part of the cog that really helped that. So, I had a level of comfort too. And I think, Adam, when I was trying to pull the pin on you the night before the guys were starting, it was about, hey, what if things don't work out? And I think where it got to me is Adam said, this is actually what happened. Adam, you said to me, give it 60 days. And if it doesn't work out, I'll take the people back and I'll place them with another client. And I was like, all right, that gives me a level of comfort and I called Adam a week later. That was when Lani sent me that email with the report. I called Adam a week later and I said, give me 2 more roles. I love this. So, I did have fears about, like, what am I getting into? What happens if this doesn't work out? Like, I've got to be able to maneuver here from a business perspective. But it was, it pretty easily overcome. I guess, the client side of things, which Anthony raised before, that was definitely something that was playing on my mind at the start, which was about, how are my clients going to react to this? That's obviously key for our business. But once I saw the quality of the work that was coming out, that solved that question, because it was like, well, we've got this talent pool here of, one of our team that looks after our personal entities in a massive tax consolidated group of 30 plus entities. She basically does that on her own. The quality of the work that comes out of there, there's only a handful of people in our AU team that could probably put that together as well. So
I think what you're describing is your confidence in the team was unconfirmed, and your fear of clients, because for clients in Australia, they're going, hang on, you're sending me to who, to where?
Yeah.
And you're sitting there going, oh, well, I hope this works out. Now, you just described that if you go for top level talent, that fear is unknown until the engagement. And once the engagement occurs, as Adam said, give us 60 days. And if you're not happy, we'll take them away. It took away that fear, and you said, all right, well, I've got very little to lose.
Yeah. And then it was also, again, so yes, that's one point. From the client perspective, it was about seeing the quality of work, but then also understanding, how does this actually work with my client? It's not, hey, client, you're getting this person that's situated in the Philippines. It's, hey, I'm here. Let's continue these conversations. I'm freed up so that I can have more of these types of conversations, and I have someone to turn around to and push the work to assist me. So it basically leveraged me off the tools to be able to focus on that client, client communication. And then that's just grown and scaled over time.
Yeah, fantastic.
Just to jump in, David, obviously speak to a lot of clients. I think there's a lot of people who feel like they're giving up a lot of control. These people have typically always worked in the office. I've been able to see them. I can go and tap them on the shoulder at any time. And COVID actually helped a lot with that because it taught us how to use tools a lot more like Zoom, Teams, etc., Slack, and businesses became very, very adept at bringing people on board that weren't in the office, particularly if you lived in Victoria, training those people when you weren't sitting beside them, and people working remotely and working from home. But there was a large part about the control. I think you do hear a lot of stories, and I hear it all the time, that the attrition rates are, you turn over your staff every 6 months, which is just not true. We've got an 87% retention rate on an annual basis across 1,000 staff that we're really, really proud of. So that's another reason. And then you do get into, how am I going to train them? How am I going to engage them? How am I going to communicate with them, build those relationships? How am I going to build career plans for them? But as Brenton's explained today, with the right planning and the right structures in place, it is really, really achievable. And, Lani is doing it, as Brenton keeps mentioning about Lani, she's doing a much different role now to what she did when she walked through the doors at Integrate over 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So, Adam, I've got a question for you. So in terms of business, like what kind of businesses does this model favor? Like who does it work for better and who doesn't it work for as well?
I think it really does work for businesses that have got that entrepreneurial mindset. They are willing to take a risk and to give something a shot. They don't believe that what they're doing is completely unique and they're the only ones who can actually do it. So they've got to have that mindset of, this can actually be done, it can be achieved, that there is people outside of Australia who do have the knowledge, the education, they work in the same time zone, etc., to be able to do that. That would be, when we sit there and we go, what does our ideal customer look like? That's what they look like. They've obviously got a problem like Brenton did 5.5 years ago when we first communicated, that they're sitting there and they're going, I know I can't keep doing things the way that I'm doing, and I know that I need to change. We do try and make it as easy as we possibly can and to remove those barriers to entry so that people can try it. And what Brenton's mentioned before, we encourage people to start with one role. We sit there and say, you might need 3, but don't try and eat the elephant all in one go. Just hire one role, get comfortable with it. And what we typically find is within 60 days, and a lot of the times within 30 days, we're getting a phone call saying, this is working fantastic, let's hire the next person, or let's hire the next 2 people in the case of Brenton. It's a real typical story that we see.
Yeah, right. Right. Is there anything you'd like to add on top of this, Brenton?
No, I really do think that, that point there about just slowly going in and just finding the feed and working with Integrate, or chatting to even some of the other clients within the Integrate network about what they've done. I usually find that people are more than willing to kind of share their own stories as well. Is start off small, get the right structure in place, and that's the real key to making this successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I like what Adam said, because during COVID, and it's happening now with the economy, we have what's called forced innovation. And, Zoom's been around for a long time. Outsourcing has been around for a long time. Why did it take a pandemic to get people to sort of lean into this and say, actually, this is really good? And I think, like you touched on, this whole idea of being entrepreneurial, and a lot of people in business, they're too busy doing the work to think strategically. And a strategic advantage occurs when you have an idea that no one else is doing, and you jump in on that idea because it gives you a head start on the market. And if you wait for everyone else to do it, it's commoditized. It's not like you're doing it strategically, you're doing it because you have to. And I think that's what you're touching on here, is you're saying it's not the industry, it's the mindset of the guy who's running the joint to actually consider, this is a way that I can actually, take a quantum leap in development of how we deliver a product or service. Because, when Brenton talks about this, he sort of, he's very comfortable saying, Gill Group's growing at this rate of, we've 10x'd in 7 years. And it's not like it's a startup business, right? You're talking about accounting and services to businesses that's been around for many, many years. So for you to be able to grow at that level, you have to do something differently, or else you're just another accounting firm. What would you consider that secret sauce, Brenton? Back to you.
I was just going to make another point before I jump into that, is about it's probably more rare these days to come across a business who doesn't have some form of this as part of their strategy, and the most successful businesses have this as part of their strategy.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, our secret sauce is just about having a plan to it. So it's about having, when you've got a small team, it's the points that we've touched on. Small team, it's more qualified senior people. It's waiting those extra, 4 weeks, 6 weeks potentially to hire someone, to find the right person while you're starting out. As you get scale, you can fill different roles at different levels. It's about looking through the business from the ground up and going, what are the processes that I currently do that I don't need to do? So in the early days for us, that's how we had one of the team that came out, and we basically mapped out all of our processes. So we brought a team member out for about a month, who's actually one of the directors now at Integrate, Adam. She's one of your senior people. We basically mapped out all the systems and processes and said, okay, what do we do here? Can we do this more efficiently? What needs to be done locally versus what can be done offshore, and what is the process there? And it's just going through everything from the ground up.
Yeah, fantastic.
One thing I'd also like to mention as well, David, just back to your original question. So we've got over 1,000 staff. We've got 140 clients, roughly average number of staff members to a client, 7. We're obviously talking to Brenton, who's got 55 odd. Our largest client's got about 240 odd. But we've got a significant number of customers that have 1 staff member. So they might be an authorised rep, they might be a mortgage broker, they might run a bookkeeping business.
Yep.
They've got themselves, and they've got someone in the Philippines. And then what they will be doing with their day is sitting there and getting rid of all of those admin and support tasks that have to be done, and they have to be done really, really well, but they're not necessarily generating income or bringing new customers through the door. So those businesses free themselves up from those tasks so that they can actually focus more on growing their business, building their network, unearthing further opportunities amongst their existing customers, getting referrals, doing marketing, attending events and things like that. So a lot of businesses go into it for cost reduction, but what they'll typically do is they'll grow their team because of revenue increases, not because it's saving, but more because they're actually becoming far more profitable as a result of having more staff members on board.
Yeah, I think, one of the comments I heard many years ago is, in business, there's no standing still. You're either growing or you're dying.
Yeah.
And I think when you have an opportunity to do this, you're actually doubling the workforce by using this resource, which means you can tip in more people, which gives you this ability to accelerate growth rather than save costs. Because I think saving costs has limits. I think growing a business is unlimited. So when we talk about growth, we do talk about profit. But, cutting costs is finite, and it's a scarcity game. Building team, adding value, building team, innovating, there's no cap on that. And I think that sort of leads into that entrepreneurial idea that you talked about with Brenton, because, acquisition sounds exciting, but it sounds like a bit of work, right?
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, it's the most leveraged activity. So when we talked about those 4 steps in that triangle, leverage to me is doing the most valuable thing with your time. And for me, for Brenton, sitting down and doing my end-of-year tax returns, probably not the most valuable use of his time, right? He's thinking, no, I'm thinking about, where do I get my next acquisition from, so I can grow my business by acquisition as opposed to by providing the service myself. So let's sort of bring this home, because I'd like to sort of wrap this conversation up with some summary of points. So Adam, first with you, if you were to sort of summarize today's conversation in top 3 things, what would you consider to be the most important elements of what we've been discussing?
Well, from a top 3 perspective, I think it would be, and I know you mentioned this a lot on your courses, David, have a plan. That no one starts building a house without a plan. You don't invite the builder over and say, just start building over there, and you don't give them that plan. So I think that is absolutely important. And what Brenton touched on before is really look at, what does your business need? What are those gaps that you've got in your business, and what skills and capabilities do you need to be able to grow your business, and hand those tasks across to someone else while you can focus on that growing the business. And what does that plan look like? So getting in that plan, it's creating the right job description, and then working with Integrate to find that right staff member I think the second most important thing is that Brenton touched on is when you bring these people on board, how do you actually work with them? How do you engage with them? How do you treat them as part of your team? They're an extension of your organization. They're a valued part of your business. They're not just there because they're a lower cost resource. They're there because they're absolutely important for driving the strategy of your business. And then once you've done all of that, it is how do you actually give individuals a career so that these people stay with you for a long period of time. So how do you bring someone in at this level, let's say an Australian bookkeeper, and then how do you train them up to be an Australian tax accountant? As they go through that journey, they're obviously getting a lot of learning and development opportunities from both hard skills that the Guild Group would provide in this example for the staff. Integrate, provide all of the soft skill training like problem solving, decision making, stakeholder management, effective communication skills, etc. But they would be the three key things. So it's starting with the right plan, bringing the right people on board, training and educating those staff so that they hang around for a long period of time and engaging with them.
Yeah, fantastic. And from you, Brendan, is there anything you'd add to that?
Look, I think it's covered off there, but it's about having the structure, the plan. Within your organisation, what are the roles that you want to look at, and then what is the best way to deliver those, depending on the type of organisation. Like how do you structure that? Can they be client facing? Can they not be client facing? Are they billable, non-billable type kind of roles? I think that's summed up pretty well.
Good. I mean, I just want to add one little thing to this, because sometimes we forget that having employees are investments in the business. And literally we're looking at return on investment, and we're saying, okay, we're going to employ these people. We can get them a better rate, but there's also more available if we go offshore. But we need to make sure they deliver the service well, they integrate well, and then they stay. Because if they don't stay, then the cost of employment becomes, it doesn't matter where you're getting people from. If you're churning people, it costs a lot. And it's not just the wages, right? It's the downtime, it's the retraining, it's the orientation, it's that fear of, will this person be able to represent me properly? So I think finding them is one part, in training them and delegating effectively is part two, and part three is how do I keep them if they're good? Yeah, cool.
And we're continuously evolving that as well. So as I said, we're currently redoing our career pathways and our job descriptions and our incentive framework, and looking at ESOP and how we can roll that out through the Philippines as well for our key people like the Lanis and Ceciles of the world. We're continuously looking at whatever's in place now as our business is growing is kind of not relevant or needs to be adjusted into what it is now.
Yeah, awesome. Guys, I think we don't have a lot of questions today, and I think we've answered the ones we've got. If anyone has any questions, this is your last few minutes before we start closing this thing down. I suppose what I'd like to say to people on this call is two things. Number one, Brenton's been an open book about how he's done this, right? And there's no secret here. Adam is the guy that sort of drove you should try this, you should try this. The missing link for most people I meet is they don't have the vision. They sort of say, well, I need someone for 2 hours a week. And it's like, well, that's not really going to do much, right? What you need to start to think about is how do you create roles within the organization that you can fill? And that comes down to vision. Where do you want to take this business to? And I ask a lot of people, I say, what's your 3-year or what's your 5-year? Or my most important question I ask people is, what will your business look like when it's finished? And if you can't answer that, then what are you building? And you go, well, I don't know what finished looks like. And you go, well, let's go 10 years or let's go 5 years. And it's far enough away that we now have a sort of, a guiding light. And for most people, it's about growth. And I'm not talking about getting busier. It's not busyness, right? It's about growth in terms of build a team so that it's not as dependent on any one person, and so that we can provide a robust service to our clients. And so, that we can accommodate the needs in the market. So I'd like to sort of extend this to anybody who's listening to this. There's going to be some people watching the recording. If you have any questions around how this works, Adam's the go-to for me, because he's the guy that sits there on the fence and goes, let me look at your business, let me look at your structure, and let's work out where we can fill gaps. For us, it's about the planning. So if people don't have a picture of where they want to take their business to, that's what we do. We've been doing it for 25 years. I still think it's a missing link for most people. They're not good at getting clarity on what they're building. And when they do get clarity on what they're building, they don't know the roadway. They don't know the roadmap. They don't know whether to turn left or right at the corner. Now, that to me is planning 101. right? But once that's in play, then it's a matter of get a person on, train them up, see if they produce, get the next person, and next thing you know, 55. It's quite a number. So I'd like to acknowledge, first of all, Brenton, because for most people, Brenton's a pretty he's a quiet guy. He doesn't talk about the business structure at length. So getting inside his head and understanding the transition is super important. And also I'd like to thank Adam for doing the introduction and letting us do a case study today rather than just saying, here's why you should outsource. Because for most people, it's not about should we or shouldn't we, it's about what are other people doing and what are the things that they've had to deal with. And I think we've covered a lot of that today. So I want to thank both of you guys for today's session.
Awesome.
It's a bit outside of what we normally do. There's no presentations, but for me, case studies sometimes are worth, their weight in gold. So really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
And look, anyone on this call or watching this video, there's going to be some links attached to this. If you want to reach out to these guys, you can. I would encourage it if you're considering outsourcing or if you're not even sure. It's worth putting that on the table from an entrepreneur's point of view. As Adam said, you've got to look at ideas and work out what the risk is that's related to it and back yourself. And I think the best way to back yourself is to have some advisors that can help you and guide you through this process. So thanks for you guys for listening today. And for those guys who are watching the recording, hopefully we'll hear from you as well. I think we might start wrapping this up if there's no more questions.
Oh, there is one there, David. I'm more than happy to answer it.
Okay.
It's talking about, is there an expectation that staff will immigrate to Australia? We've probably had 3 or maybe 4 staff in the 6 years who have immigrated to Australia. And that was more at the customer's request than at the staff's request. So no, it's not a common question that comes up. There is a shortage of accountants in Australia, and that visas for accountants can be got by Filipino staff, but we don't see that being taken up on a large scale at all, and those numbers would support that.
An interesting question, because I guess there is a big discrepancy, and looking at it from the other point of view is, can we do this? But the trick is the cost of living in Australia is significantly higher as well. So, it might look good on the surface.
Yeah, exactly. And I think their relative salary compared to the rest of the market, they're probably earning a lot more in the Philippines and comparative what a tax accountant would earn in Australia. So that all of those things would need to be taken into account by the individual.
Yeah, and as you say, I think it's a case by case. So if anyone has specific questions like that, this is where reaching out to Adam. He's got enough clients under his belt that he understands these sort of anomalies and how to deal with them. But they're valid questions, right? Because this sort of revolves around that same question of what happens if I train up the perfect person and they leave, and that old sort of chestnut where what happens if you don't train them and they stay.
Exactly.
So I think the risk of training people within your organization is you do make them better and more attractive to the marketplace. But then your job as an entrepreneur is to make sure that there's a career path that keeps them motivated and focused and wanting to stay for the journey. So it's a great question. Appreciate that one. All right, guys, I think we've come to the end of our dialogue today. And I know we're finishing a bit early, so people got 15 minutes to go and do something else with their time. I know Brenton's always appreciative when we finish early because there's so much on his plate. Guys, thanks again for your time today. This has been really useful. And hopefully the guys who have been joining us for this journey have got some great value out of it. So we might sort of close things off there unless, there's one new message. It's a thank you. Awesome. Guys, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Will. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.